I'm doing your great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop so I can come down to you? That is a great work from 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem, as discussed in the Bible and the book of Nehemiah. Let's discuss how this continues to affect the region and the U.S. and national security today here on the Great Work Podcast. All right, welcome back. Great Work News Daily Updates. Today is Wednesday, July 31st, 2024. Slow news day, right? We have a lot to get into, so here's my thoughts on some big headlines, and we're pretty Middle East focused today, but we'll bring it back around to American politics at the end. The first biggest headline is that Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, was assassinated last night in his home in Tehran. He was in Iran visiting the inauguration of the new president, Masoud Pezeshkian, who has been heralded as this reform president for Iran. I think we're going to see just how much of a scam that characterization and narrative is in the coming days. While Iranian media is reporting that this is Israel, and Hamas, out of character during this conflict, actually put out a statement confirming that Ismail Haniyeh has been eliminated and that Israel is responsible. Israel has not confirmed that they did this, which really right now Israeli media is just kind of putting out Arab headlines from throughout the Arabic world and reporting on it that way, which is typically what they do when Israel doesn't take responsibility for what they do. And when they do that, it's because they're trying to de-escalate. Because if you think about it, this is incredibly embarrassing for Iran. Haniyeh typically lives in Doha, Qatar. I believe there's jokes that he lives in the Four Seasons there. So he's been completely safe and sound in Doha for the last 10 months. But the second he steps into Iran, right, the orchestrators of this whole charade, he's taken out. That's a really bad look for Iran. And since Israel hasn't confirmed what happened or that they did what happened, although it's most likely that they did, we're never going to know for sure what they did. But what's most likely is that they flew F-35s, which are stealth combined fighters and bombers, through Iraqi airspace. Iraq doesn't have air defense systems. That's what the U.S. bases there for. They flew them and entered Iran from Iraqi airspace and then targeted Haniyeh's home with precision. So Israel has shown once again that they are superior militarily. They can target faraway places with pinpoint precision to take out bad guys if need be. Notably, Israel didn't tell the U.S. before they did this, and the U.S. is kind of doing what they always do, saying, oh my God, we don't want a regional war. Typical. I'm seeing on social media and even people in the media saying that Haniyeh was a moderate. He was just as surprised as anyone about October 7th. He was the one leading negotiations, so now that's all going to go south. And I have some news for you. Nobody in Hamas is moderate, okay? This is a Muslim Brotherhood offshoot extremist Islamist group, okay? None of them are moderates. Maybe he lives a more moderate lifestyle because he, lives in Doha and he lives off all the aid money that they smuggle and steal from the people of Gaza. But this guy's not a moderate. Comparing him to Sinwar to say that he's a moderate is like saying that chlamydia is better than gonorrhea. At the end of the day, they're both STDs. They're both terrorists. There's no moderates in Hamas. It's not like Haniyeh is a moderating force for that organization, okay? And as for how it goes with the negotiations, are those all going to go south now? I mean, listen, we've been holding these negotiations for the last 10 months and nothing has come of any of them. Since the initial hostage exchange deal in December, we've been always painted as Bibi's the one that's the stalemate or the one holding out. It's likely Hamas. They want thousands of prisoners to release hostages. Every single one of them is a war crime, by the way. They want thousands of prisoners in return. So that's not an acceptable outcome. And it was probably due for, changing up who's at that negotiating table in the first place. People have doubted Egypt being there. People have doubted Qatar being there. Well, now Haniyeh is not going to be there. And hopefully that means that a deal can be reached soon. I think it's terribly stupid to say that the negotiation talks are going to go south because he's dead. They haven't been going great. Most of Hamas's main leaders this brings me to my next point. They've been liquidated since October 7th. So first we had Saleh al-Ori, who was a key political and military figure for Hamas, and he was taken out in Lebanon on January 2nd of this year. Marwan Issa, the deputy commander of Al-Qassam brigades, Hamas's military, was taken out on March 2nd in Gaza after, just another one bites the dust. Mohammed Daif, who was the main commander of Al-Qassam brigades, was taken out on July 13th in Gaza after multiple attempts, I believe like 3 or 4 attempts to assassinate him by Israel since the year 2000. And notably, since he has been taken out, although Hamas has not confirmed that he's gone, military attacks have decreased significantly from 5 to 6 per day to less than 2 per day on average since what's being pinpointed as his death, which is notable because it shows that there probably wasn't a command structure left in place. So even if a bunch of these people have been radicalized in Gaza since October 7th, they don't have any direction. They also don't have a way to rearm, right? Because the Philadelphia corridor is cut off, so they can't smuggle weapons in through Egypt anymore. So they're just kind of stuck. So even if there's crazy people wanting to do insane things, they don't have an organized way to do that. So we've seen top leadership, with the notable exception being the butcher of Khan Yunis, Yahya Sinwar, have all been taken out since October 7th. They don't have a way to rearm, and 2/3 of their fighting force of Al-Qassam brigades has been either eliminated or injured to the point where they can't fight anymore or are sitting in Israeli jails right now. So hopefully Sinwar's day is coming soon, and hopefully this pushes Hamas to, again, the negotiating table, because they can't fight. They don't have any fighters left. They don't have a structure left, anything. Then we have the assassination of Fouad Shakra. So while I was in the middle of writing this segment last night, that's when the news about Hania came out. And I have to be honest, I'm happy, because when I was writing this, I was just kind of underwhelmed by the strike in Beirut. So it was reported that Haj Hussein was said to be the number 2 in command of Hezbollah's military wing, and he was eliminated. Then it came out, people were questioning whether or not he was really that important. Most people didn't even have cards made for him, like the accounts saying like, oh, another one bites the dust. Like, they didn't even know who he was. Well, it turns out he goes by a different name, Fouad Shakra. I don't speak Arabic clearly. And he is extremely high up, according to Saudi sources, maybe number 1 in charge, behind like Nasrallah. He's been around Hezbollah longer than Nasrallah, apparently. So he's kept in the shadows, but had, I guess, remained ordering strikes on, the Druze village in the Golan, and notably, he is responsible for the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that left 241 American servicemen dead in the 1980s. So he was targeted while it was still light outside in Daya, Beirut, which is a Hezbollah stronghold area of Beirut. Notably, the United States told Israel, do not strike Beirut, and they did anyways. And apparently this guy was visiting his mistress, which is what got him out of his house. So I guess that's the consequence you get for living in sin. So it's unclear how many were killed in the strike. Most news outlets are reporting that it was just this guy and whatever woman he was with, but a couple other less trustworthy sources are saying that civilians died as well. That will come out in the coming days, but overall, this is a pinpoint strike that got a bad guy that has been wanted by America for 40 years. And, we should be happy about that, right? Although the US, of course, is not. If you're unfamiliar with the Marine barracks bombings, because a lot of people aren't familiar, I'll give you kind of a brief overview. So during the Lebanese Civil War, which began in 1975, that began as a fight between Lebanese Christian Maronites and the PLO. The PLO had been forced out of Jordan into Lebanon. They set up basically checkpoints, and the way this all started is they started checking people's IDs who have their religions put on them, and when Christians came through, they would kill the Christians, and that's kind of how the Lebanese Civil War started. It kind of died down after that, and then hostilities picked back up kind of towards the late 70s, early 80s, and at that time, a bunch of regional as well as like European and America actors tried to get involved and kind of calm the tensions down, because the Civil War kind of exacerbated other sectarian tensions that had existed since Lebanon's founding in 1946. So Syria invaded and occupied, Israel invaded and occupied, and the US and France invaded and occupied all parts of Lebanon to just try and calm things down. And what's interesting is when everybody talks about like, oh, ending occupation, they never talk about Syria. They only talk about Israel and the US and France, which, that should be obvious by now. It was in response to the US, French, and Israeli occupation of Lebanon that Hezbollah was founded. So Hezbollah was officially founded in 1982. It's called the Party of God, and it's made up of Lebanese Shias. They had originally been training alongside the PLO to aid in like the Sunni militias in the civil war, but they had already been receiving like outside support from Iran. After the Islamic Revolution of Iran in 1979, it was clear that they always meant to export their religious revolution throughout the region, and they started to do that by arming militias and giving support to like native Shia groups in different areas. So we saw that with like the Shias in Yemen that are now the Houthis, and most notably the Lebanese Shias who had been there since the Safavids. And the Lebanese Shias had always kind of been overlooked politically and socially since Lebanon was founded in 1946. Again, their kind of main goal with their founding, they were initially extremely secretive, but their goal was to rid Lebanon of occupation. And today, typically when we hear the word occupation in terms of the Middle East, we think about Israel, who occupied Lebanon from 1982 to the year 2000. But at the time, they also meant France and the US. And we pulled out in 1983. And Hezbollah's attacks had a lot to do with that. If you're wondering why France was involved, Lebanon and Syria were part of the French mandate, which, we talk about the British mandate all the time of Palestine. This was just kind of their version up in Lebanon and Syria. And France has always had a long-standing relationship with the Maronite Christians, who were the majority population of Lebanon, because the Maronites are basically a group that go back to the time of Christ, or just after the time of Christ. They've kind of existed as a religious group which had a relative degree of freedom no matter who was kind of in control. There's a bunch of mountains in Lebanon where religious minorities kind of experienced a lot of freedom throughout like the Ottomans and times like that. And the French would typically help the Maronites. So to rid the occupation, Hezbollah operated as traditional terrorist groups do. So they used guerrilla tactics such as urban warfare and using human shields. They invented suicide bombing. So the Party of God is great, guys. And up until 9/11, they were responsible for the most attacks and deaths of U.S. citizens of any other terror group. So that would be the Marine Barracks bombing, which was an explosion of a truck parked outside of the U.S. Marine Barracks in 1983, as well as Hezbollah did a suicide attack on the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, which left 60 dead. And eventually it was because of these attacks happening that the U.S. and France decided to pull out, because we were losing too many people and we didn't know where it was coming from. The U.S. really hasn't offered thanks to Israel for killing the guy responsible for the deaths of so many Americans, which in my opinion is very gross. They're kind of sweeping this under the rug and pretending it didn't happen, which is kind of typical for this administration, but nonetheless disgusting. There was a $5 million bounty out on this guy, and I would be very surprised if anybody in Israel got that, or, anyone got that. I think the White House just keeps trying to reiterate that they don't want a regional war, and, calls not wanting, like, that we don't want a regional war have not done anything to prevent us from where we're at right now, which is the precipice of a regional war. So we should probably look at switching up that strategy, although it's highly unlikely that we do. And as I began recording this, we were hit with another headline. It seems that Israel has gone for a hat trick with eliminating bad guys in the Middle East. In an airstrike on Damascus, Syria, it seems that Israel has taken out IRGC Quds Force Brigadier General Amir Ali Hajidazeh, who was the commander of the IRGC Aerospace Forces. He's said to be the senior commander who planned and ordered the combined drone and missile strike on Israel last April from Iran. So this is unconfirmed, but Israel has been acting in both Baghdad and Syria since yesterday. And from all the reports I'm seeing, getting this Hajidaza guy, this is bigger than Hania, which is insane because Hania's huge. So what does this all mean, right? Is a regional war imminent? There's no way to be sure. People are threatening that Israel's just made these huge mistakes. There's no way Iran doesn't respond. But I want to remind you that typically when Iran is hit where it hurts, when they're hit themselves, they typically back down. So we saw that with the assassination order by Trump on Qasem Soleimani, the main general of the IRGC Quds Force in January of 2020, and then also when Reagan ordered to take out 80% of Iran's navy, they backed down then too. So right now we've not only hit Iran on Iranian soil and taken out a Hamas commander, but they've also killed a senior commander in the Quds Force. So that could be a recipe for them backing down. If they don't, because kind of things have shifted ever since their attack in mid-April, they could attack again. There's differing opinions about whether or not they meant to actually get anything through with that attack. I'm in the camp that believes in the combined missile and drone strike, that they were trying to get Israeli blood, and they would have been surprised at how well everything was stopped. Most stuff didn't even make it to Israeli airspace. It was taken down before it got there. But other people say that was just Iran testing to see how much they would have to send in order to get stuff through. So I guess technically Iran could send, double or something like that, send 300 missiles and 300 drones and hope that a couple of them get through. That's unlikely though. What's more likely is that they activate a proxy, namely Hezbollah, and this is what everybody's kind of been watching for. Should Hezbollah fully activate, I say this all the time, but this would be the worst war that anybody's seen in modern history, right? I mean, in the last century. We should avoid this at all costs. I know we keep saying, we want to avoid regional war. It's not working, but that does not mean that we embrace a regional war like this. This would be horrendous. It would have terrible implications for both Lebanese and Israelis. What Hezbollah would do is launch thousands of rockets and barrages, mostly short, medium, and long-range dumb bombs, but they would put in a few, precision-guided munitions. They have a stockpile of anywhere from 500 to 1,500 of those, and they would aim them at, Israeli population centers, going for mass casualty events. So the chemical plant in Haifa, the nuclear facility. They would go for the Knesset. They would go for cultural hubs in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, things like that. They would try and destroy those places. So we want to avoid that, right? And the good news is that Hezbollah seems to want to avoid that too. They seem to not want an all-out war, and they seem to have been kind of avoiding one. So we just have to hope whoever's negotiating this, either Israel has shown enough strength that Hezbollah will back down, or somebody can negotiate pushing them back north of the Litani before Israel can fully deal with them. Because right now we're seeing threats from the UK, ever since the Labour government took over, that they're going to stop arming Israel with some of the weapons. And they don't give very much. I think last year it was $23 million worth of weapons. Comparison to the United States, we give $3.8 billion. So, it remains to be seen what would happen there. But yeah, I mean, we want to avoid a regional war. One could break out. You just got to keep your eye on this. We don't know. Right now, the U.S. did move 3 ships from Crete to just off the coast of Lebanon to help aid UK ships that are already there for the potential evacuation of Lebanese civilians to Cyprus. There's also a scenario where we could run interference for some of these missiles if they start launching them a bunch, but being that there's not as much space between Israel and Lebanon, obviously, they're right on the border of one another, it wouldn't be the same as the U.S. helping to stop a bunch of missiles and drones from hitting Israel like we did with the Iranian strike in April. So I guess we just kind of sit here and wait and see what happens. Again, we need to pray that this doesn't happen, but right now a show of strength that Israel's willing is probably going to be the thing that prevents it, rather than running around with Amos Hochstein, the frickin' guy who negotiated 1701, which Hezbollah has been in violation of for the last 18 years. And if you don't know, Resolution 1701 is the resolution that ended the 2006 war. And it said that Hezbollah needed to disarm and remain north of the Litani River. And right now they're right on the border of Israel, far south of the Litani. And clearly they didn't disarm. They have like way more arms than they've ever had. So, he right now is trying to get Hezbollah to back off. Apparently he's been passing them like coordinates of where Israel might strike, which is insane. I don't think that he's going to be the one to probably prevent this regional war from breaking out, but we'll see. So that's kind of your update today. Hopefully we have more tomorrow to go over and we can get back to kind of like U.S. politics as well. But have a great rest of your day.
An Excelsior Studios original production.
A Hamilton County woman is facing serious charges accused of scamming several people out of rental homes.
April 26, 2023 was a normal day for most in the suburbs of Indianapolis, but it was shaping up to be a very bad day for 25-year-old Megan Stoner, who was notified of a warrant out for her arrest.
9 charges for corrupt business influence fraud, where the loss is between $750,000 and $50,000, and theft.
And unfortunately for Megan, she would not be navigating her newfound legal troubles in private, because a community of hundreds who had been quietly watching her for years was assembling on the internet to discuss their experiences with her, which ranged from bizarre to dangerous to outright criminal, arguably worse than what Megan had been charged with.
Basically what she did was emotionally manipulated and I'll say abused even me for about nearly these 10 years.
And like, she will suck you dry. Any inch you give her, she just takes them out. Like
Google number after Google number. You block the one, she's not done yet. She's going to get that last word.
The second you let her in, she takes over. And I mean, I would wake up to 20, 30, 40 notifications. I mean, she was scrolling back through things from my high school.
He's a dangerous human being.
And the strangest thing of all is, as her case unfolded, she continued to interact with this online community, which she called her haters, which was made up of business owners she had scammed, politicos from throughout the country that she had solicited for donations, a network of evangelical pastors located outside of the United States, a local brigade of moms who had called out her antics in Facebook groups for years, and even a sex shaman ended up coming together to solve crimes that she had not yet been caught for, and were able to catch her after she ran from the police for a month and finally put her in jail. So, how did this self-described political consultant, mental health advocate, teacher, and sexual assault survivor get into this mess in the first place? And how much of her story that she had told of herself on social media for years was actually true? That's what we'll explore here every Thursday on Don't Waste This Fucking Podcast, the story of Megan Stoner.